All right, good afternoon. Welcome to the July 19th, 2023 Technical Review Committee meeting. My name is Ryan Fisher. I'm a senior planner with Oldham County Planning and Development. The purpose of this meeting is to review proposed subdivisions, zoning map amendments, and development plans before they go to the Planning Commission. This gives local agencies, those represented here in front of you today, and utility companies the opportunity to review plans in advance, as well as adjoining property owners the opportunity to ask technical questions of the applicant or agencies. So there is one item on the docket today, and that is 23-008, the Kavanaugh at 7505 Kavanaugh Road, Crestwood. That's for a development plan and zoning map amendment. So the way this hearing will work, we will first have the applicant come forward and give a brief overview of their application. We will then have the agencies represented here in the front to give their comments. And then at that point, if there's anybody here that would like to comment publicly, once again, to ask questions that are technical in nature of either the applicant or the agencies represented, they can do so at that time. So with that being said, we will have the applicant come forward first and give an overview of their application.
Thank you, members of the committee. My name is Cliff Ashburner. I'm with Dinsmore and Scholl, 101 South 5th Street, Louisville 40202. I have Corey Atkinson here from the Crestwood Ventures, who's the developer, Sophia Mazzacco with Milestone Design Group, who's probably going to be taking most of your questions regarding the plan. So as you all are familiar with the property, the subject property has been used for many years as a religiously affiliated retreat center. That has included assembly. It has included a lodge building that's got 27 units in it. And then there are several other structures on the property that have been used for kind of overnight lodging over time. The proposal now is to turn that into a for-profit event center, but essentially use the property in the way that it has been historically used, using the structures the way that they have been historically used, with some renovation to those structures. There's really very little, if any, proposed new development or kind of on-the-ground alterations within the property. So from a technical standpoint, there's not a lot that's proposed to change on the land. So with that, I'm happy to start taking comments, and like I said, I'm gonna put Sophia in front of me, and she's gonna be able to answer all your questions. Right?
Does she have anything to share first before we do the agency comments, or?
I think it would be helpful to hear what you guys have to say.
All right. So with that being said, we'll move to agency comments, and we'll start with Brian Fogel. He's Oldham County Planning and Development Assistant Director, and this is his case. So.
Yeah. Just a few technical comments that I think are probably real easily fixed on the development plan that goes along with the zoning map amendment. We do require the right-of-way dimension for all abutting streets, and we're missing it for that stub street, Kavanaugh Lane. Again, very minor and technical, like to get that on there. We would like to get the bearings and distances for the proposed southern property line, which doesn't exist yet, in recognizing that you guys will be doing that. Just a generalized indication of the substantial existing tree areas and the intent of what's to be done with that area. I mean, I know from talking to you all, the intent is to leave it undisturbed for the most part. We'd just like to get that indicated on the plan. And then the last one is eliminating and correcting the setbacks on the development plan to reflect the C2 zoning requirements. The prior requirements of the R2 and the conservation are what are indicated on the plan, and the C2 has 0 setbacks except when they abut residential properties, in which case they adopt that one, and it's just inconsistent on the plan. And again, very minor, very technical, and something that's easily fixable. We'll give you a copy of this letter so you guys have that, and if you want it emailed to you or something, we can do that also.
Okay.
Jim Silliman, County Engineer. So when we met, we had a pre-application meeting, I believe it was April 21st, a couple months ago. And at that time, we weren't sure if the land disturbance area was 1 acre. It looks like just measuring the larger parking lot, that's almost exactly an acre. So since this does exceed an acre in land disturbance, you will be required to get the Kentucky Division of Water KYR 10 permit, as well as the Stormwater Quality Management and Erosion Control permit from my office. That stormwater quality management and erosion control permit will come with it the need to compare the impervious surface pre and post development, basically be in accordance with the construction site runoff ordinance and the post-construction runoff ordinance. So I'll speak about that a little bit later. If detention is needed based on that that calculation, I'm not sure if the existing pond was going to be used for any type of detention or water quality. If it is, that's identified on the USGS mapping as a jurisdictional pond. So you'd need to get appropriate coordination with the Army Corps of Engineers if you plan on using that pond for any of those purposes. I think with I'll say unique use of a wedding event venue, there's not a lot of data, and you show that parking spaces TBD, to be determined, so those just need to, of course, be established at the next plan submittal, so those numbers are known. Brian was talking about the setbacks. In the letter that you'll get from me, there's a comment about parking not allowed in setbacks. That observation was made because there's a 50-foot front yard setback shown on the plans, but if there is indeed no setback, then that comment goes away. Shared parking, I've got a comment on that. If you could address how you're planning that. It looks like there's some shared parking involved in Division 280, 140 of the zoning ordinance comes into effect there. At our pre-application meeting, we also discussed the parking surface. The zoning ordinance indicates that it needs to be a paved surface, and we discussed the alternatives of either a chip and seal versus true asphalt over aggregate pavement section versus asphalt millings. You've got it shown as gravel. That was the one, without a waiver, that gravel alone would not be allowed. So that's going to need to be addressed. Depending on what that determination is, we'll want to see the pavement section on the next plan submittal. As far as the commercial entrance, the entrance, it appears that the site distance, and we talked about this at the pre-application meeting also, kind of unsure if that vertical curve was going to get in the way of the site distance. It's pretty close. It does impede the 280-foot typical intersection site distance for 25 miles an hour. You might be able to provide the 155-foot stopping site distance with some tree clearing, or maybe if you could move the entrance to the high point, maybe that would solve it. But then you're looking at some horizontal issues also, potentially. Kind of back to the, if you do utilize any stormwater detention based on your calculations of the impervious surface. Of course, no trees are permitted in the 100-year water surface elevation. A detention basin would need to be encompassed by a drainage easement that would be recorded with the Oldham County Clerk before we released an erosion control bond. And then lastly, with regard to the existing Kavanaugh Road, also we kind of discussed at that pre-application meeting, there's not a category in the ITE, the Institute for Traffic Engineers manual for a wedding or event space. So your engineer was going to provide trip generations so we could concur or review that and then see if there's any proposed or potential needs for improvement on Kavanaugh Road, considering it's only about 15 or 16 feet wide. So if you could provide that information still, we can go through and review that further.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Is that peak hour or is that 24-hour when you're talking about?
Right. Peak hour trips.
Okay.
Yep. that's all I had.
Can I ask another question with regard to the basin or the use of the pond? So currently, the property drains that direction. I mean, that's why the pond is there. I don't know that the increase in impervious surface, assuming that you consider gravel impervious, is going to really change the amount of water that's going to the pond. So
Right, and that's why I was saying based on the calculations, we just want to see, and actually, the preliminary drainage calculations show pre and a post within 0.01 of that C value. And I actually didn't mention it. There's an area where you show proposed concrete sidewalk. I'm wondering if you're going to be taking away some of that gravel where that sidewalk is to make it more aesthetic. So then if you take away that gravel, you might even bring down that C value to where it's no change. And then your calculations are going to show that there's no change in the C and there's no detention needed. We just need to see that.
okay,
So,
all right.
Is that all? You have questions for Jim?
No, not right now.
Okay.
I may come back.
All right. Matt?
Matt Tolar with the GIS and addressing. As far as addressing goes now, what do they use? Just a single address for like, because I mean, if you're doing for profit, I mean, there could be a lot of overturn on all those buildings. Are there any maps that show like you're in cabin number 1 or any of these other buildings if there was an emergency?
I don't have the answer for that. I don't think that there. Yeah, I don't think there are separate addresses for each structure.
Because with all those structures, just in case there is an emergency, since they're not, they're pretty far off that road, we might have to have like sub-addresses issued for those just to be put on the buildings. And we can use 7505 Kavanaugh, but it would be like, building 1, 2, 3, or some kind of something for first responders. So if somebody does come on, because most likely they're not going to know where they are.
Yeah.
If they're coming from out of town or just not familiar with the area, just for 911 purposes.
Do you have a preference between 1, 2, 3 or ABC?
I prefer a number, but
a
we would, we would have to coordinate so that I could give something to dispatch so that they would know that whatever building is, whatever number we assign it. So
Okay.
we'll have to get with that if we want to do like 100 or 1, but some identification that will be on all these buildings so that people will know just in case there is.
Yeah.
That'd be the only comment I have, just because.
That makes sense.
Do you want anything? Mr. Ward?
It's Charlie Ward with the Oldham County Health Department. Just kind of 2 items of housekeeping. So originally, the health department had you all permitted as a youth camp. So we're no longer going to be doing that, obviously. So that permit will just expire. We'll make sure to take it out of the system. I think it was already taken care of COVID era. So, because I think things kind of stopped there. We weren't having youth camps at the time. So that would be fine. The only question is, I think since 1995, there has been a permitted kitchen facility out there on the property. The idea being, if it's just catering and brought everything in, totally fine, we don't need that facility. But if it's food made on-site, served there, then ideally you're going to need a permitted kitchen facility, which I think you have majority of everything you've needed, obviously, since it's been permitted in the past. It would just be transferring that into new ownership name and then granting you all, or issuing the permit for that, doing your biannual inspections that come along with that as well. And I think the only might change is going to be square footage and seating capacity. That's kind of how permits are justified with that in the past. So if you wanted to keep the facility and the kitchen operating, I think you have what you need: 3 comp sink, hand wash sink, mop sink, that's all there and in place. But it's carrying it over and putting it back under. So I know the youth camp we're not going to worry about anymore. If you wanted it to be great, I think you already have it there. I mean, there's the permit fee and the inspections to go along with it. So if there was anything prepared on site or someone wanted to do something on site, you're already set up and in place. But if you decide just to not do anything on site and you want to go back to catering, then it's just hot holding cabinets. You're not washing, rinsing, sanitizing anything on site. That's all served. Utensils, plates are taken back to wherever they came from. Then we wouldn't have to really entertain it. But it's whichever route you want to go with, we'll work with you all and permit it either way. So.
Okay. Is that something we need to designate on the plan before the planning commission, or is that just a comment?
Just me.
Yeah.
Just for me while I'm here, and just so I can. Yeah. The joke is Corey and I are hard to get a hold of each other. So.
All right, and before we go from agency comments, Chief, do you have anything you want to add? If you'll just come up to the mic if you do.
Reviewed it. We have no questions or comments on that. Matt did mention the address of those structures in the back.
All right, thank you. Do you all have any questions or need clarification on anything that the agency stated? If you'll just come up to the microphone, I'm sorry. And since you haven't spoken, just give your name and address for the record, please.
Yeah, it's Corey Atkinson, 6311 Cherry Lane, Crestwood. Just had a quick question for you, Jim, about the addition of impervious surface or the land disturbance over 1 acre. It is clear that the majority of that main parking lot exists in gravel already, and we're just extending it out by maybe 70 feet, right? I'm just making sure that is understood by the plan there, that that's not an entirely new.
Well, so, and if that's the case, then maybe it's not an acre of disturbance. When I look at it, there's, just looking at the bold proposed lines, it looks like there's grading happening on the entire area. Because, and maybe that's, again,
I don't think
because
that's
this
the case,
And
yeah.
if that's not the case and you're not disturbing an acre,
Yeah,
then you don't require the 2 permits that I mentioned.
Got it.
Right?
Okay.
So
'Cause when we did
you
that
would just
calculation
you would
with the
need to
mile-
clarify that. But
Got it.
typically, if you're modifying that parking lot, you are disturbing the land. So that just needs to be clear.
got it. Okay.
And if you're not, you're not.
Is that clear to you?
Yeah. Sophia Mazzacco, 108 Daventry Lane, Louisville, Kentucky, 40223. Like he said, there is that existing gravel lot, and we are just more so cleaning up the boundary of the lot and making it easier to identify where to park. We do have proposed ADA spaces there, which will need to obviously meet ADA requirements with concrete and grading. So that's where a majority of the grading would come from. We're still in the beginning phases, obviously, of engineering this just because we still are in the planning phase. But I would imagine that's where most of our grading would be, and any other disturbance would be just the little pieces outside that we're adding gravel.
Yeah, again, if you can just clarify that, and we'll talk about it. But really, I mean, even if you are close to that or on that borderline, it's possible that you don't require detention just because you're not changing the impervious surface. If you're giving some pervious elsewhere and it's balancing out, so.
Yep, I'll rerun those calculations, taking some of that gravel out where that proposed walk is going, and you're right, it might end up making it 0.
Another thought also just popped in my head. If whatever your surface is, you've got parking lines indicated. You've got to be able to paint those lines on there, right? So
I think we might note this on the plan, but those are just to show how much parking
Okay.
would be able to fit. Obviously, we wouldn't be able to effectively stripe gravel, but we just wanted to show how much parking there would be. So we could
and I'm not
exhibit
sure what the
there's
requirements are on marking spaces within the zoning ordinance. So offhand.
Yeah,
Okay.
and curbing, wheel stops as well to make sure that no one is driving over the edges of the gravel.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Is there anything else, you all?
Delineating the tree mass locations, can you elaborate on how you'd like that? We obviously haven't identified the trees out there, so we know where they are.
Yes, and that's the key thing, Sophia,
Okay.
just showing us on the plan where they are, and if there are areas that are generally determined not to be disturbed because it maintains the marketable character of that property for you, just show that on the plan.
Gotcha.
Nothing detailed of identifying the species or the size or anything. The non-engineering term I would use, the cloud showing, mature stands of trees.
You could just do it by, overlay over aerial photography and trace it.
Yeah.
That's sufficient.
That's how I
something
would
real
do it.
basic.
Okay, all right. Works for me.
All right.
And we're set for next meeting, correct?
Yep, we'll get there. So with that being said, if there's anybody out in the audience that would like to speak publicly, you can come forward at this time. Okay, seeing none. So if you receive notice of today's TRC hearing, you will receive notice of the Planning Commission hearing, which they are scheduled to go to the Planning Commission next Tuesday, so you should have already received that notice. So that would be held in this same room at 9 a.m. on Tuesday, the 25th. If nobody has anything else, this meeting will stand adjourned at 1:24. Thank you.